So far, our web application just does one thing. It listens for requests to the home page and renders an HTML page, which isn't terribly exciting. So we need to actually create some more handlers. And the handler I want to create right now is not one that renders a web page. Instead, it's one that actually takes a connection, a regular HTTP or HTTPS connection, and upgrades it to a WebSocket connection. And in order to make that happen, I need to create a new variable. And I'm going to create it right here, right after my views variable. And I'll call it var upgrade connection, which seems like a meaningful name. And that will be equal to a type. And the type is WebSocket.upgrader. And that actually requires a few parameters. It requires a read buffer, a write buffer, and whether or not to check the origin, which is a security thing. So we'll put in these there. Read buffer size, I'll make that 1024, which is a good size. Write buffer size, I'll make 1024. And finally, check origin. And that is going to be equal to a function that just takes the request and returns a bool. And the bool it's going to return is return true. So that's a variable I can use to upgrade connections. Now let's use that variable and come down here just after the home handler and create a new handler. And this one will be called WS endpoint, our WebSocket endpoint. And it is a handler, so it still requires the response writer and the pointer to the request. So let's put those in there. And what does this do? Well, the very first thing it's going to do is to upgrade the connection. So I'll create a new variable, WS, for my WebSocket connection, potentially an error, and I'll call that variable I just created, upgrade connection, and that actually has a method on it called upgrade. An upgrade requires your response writer, your pointer to your request, and the third argument I'm going to leave as nil, but you can actually look at it and see what it does. Oh, don't need to do that. Try that again. If error is not equal to nil, then what do I want to do? If the error is not equal to nil, I'll just log the error for now. Okay, so upgrade actually takes three parameters. And the first one is your response writer. The second one is your request. And the third one is your response header. And we're not going to worry about the response header right now. It's unimportant for our purposes in figuring out how WebSockets work, but you can read about it at your leisure if you choose to do so. So I've created that WS, that variable. I've upgraded the connection. Let's just log something. Log.println, and I'll just log client. Try that again. Client connected to endpoint. Okay, let's try spelling endpoint right. So client is connected. Now I've logged this. And what I want to do at this point is send back a response. And I can just send back text if I want to, but I like to structure my responses in a way that makes them easy to parse. I like to use JSON. So let's define a new type just in front of this WS endpoint. Type, and I will call it WS JSON response. And it's a struct. And I'll give it a few fields that I can actually use. So I'm going to put some in right now that we'll be using in a few minutes or the next few lectures. But let's just define them all right now, the ones that I know I'm going to be sending back. So I'm going to send back something called action, which will be a string, and we'll define the JSON response to be action lowercase. And then I'll define another one, which I will call message, and we'll just call that message for our JSON response. And we'll define another one called message type, which you don't need to worry about right now, but we'll be using it in a little while. And finally, well, that's enough for right now. We can go with those. Okay, so let's format this, give a few comments. WS JSON response defines the response sent back from WebSocket. And WS endpoint needs a name. Upgrades connection to WebSocket. Okay, so that's done so far. Now I want to actually give a response back because I've defined this variable WS and I have to do something with it or I can't even compile this program. So let's just go with a really simple one. Var response is of type WS JSON response. And I'll put in here response.message. Better spell response right. And I'll just put in a very simple HTML, which I'll do this way. I'll wrap it with a backtick so I can use quotations if I need to at some point. EM small connected to server. Small EM. Okay. Now I want to send that response back to the client. So we can do that really, really easily with the Gorilla WebSockets package. We just say error is equal to WS, write JSON. Try that again. Write JSON, write message. Write message would actually send back just text, and I want to send back JSON. So we'll write our response. And it takes care of the marshalling that into JSON for us and sending it back. And let's just check for an error. If error is not equal to nil, we'll just log that for right now. Okay? So that is all I need to worry about right now. That gives me an endpoint. So I need to actually set up a route to that endpoint. So let's go over to here, and let's just duplicate this route. And we'll, instead of going to handlers home, we'll go to handlers WS endpoint. And instead of a slash, we'll listen to WS. So this will be the URL we call from our web page that we're sending to the end user. So we need to go into that web page and add some JavaScript that allows us to connect to the WS endpoint and see if we connect. And we'll take care of that in the next lecture.